Hello everyone out there in YouTube land. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Flintstones number 6 from 2017. It was written by Mark Russell and drawn by Steve Pugh. A brief recap, I have reviewed the first 5 issues in this series and this will be the 6th. This issue is also the first one to be released in 2017. Also, just so you know, DC and Hanna-Barbera have been doing comic book runs on many classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Aside from the Flintstones, there are also Scooby-Doo Apocalypse, Future Quest, which is the Johnny Quest thing, Wacky Raceland, and others. As for every issue in this comic, this one has a theme. Number 6 focuses on the benefits and the drawbacks of civilization, as well as what people do when they think their civilization is ending. So, without any further ado, let's get started. And as always, a warning, this review may contain spoilers. One quick thing I forgot to mention, the colorist on these comic books is Chris Chuckery, and the letterer is Dave Sharp. So starting off, I thought this was a great issue. It has a lot of humor in it and has a fun story. So starting off, Fred and Wilma are at the mall, and they have some pretty funny store names, like there's Spears and Robot, Panda XS, Lithic Core, Hammerstones, Transpangea. So a lot of parody names, which is, you know, that's how the Flintstones, a lot of the humor was puns. So that's the first page. Second page, they are at the First Church of Gerald again, and oh, that's the top half of the page. The second half of the page shows the scientists at the Bedrock Cave of Science and Technology. Last thing on that page is the news reporter, and he's saying, thanks to civilization, things have never been better. And it shows the crime statistics. Brain clubbing, down 3%. Grand Theft Wheel, down 7%. Witchery, down 8%. Human beings have never before lived in such peace and prosperity. Unlike the savages in most parts of the world, the days of constantly fighting and scrapping to survive appear behind us. So, how do you explain the relative wealth and tranquility of our society, anonymous pundit? There can only be one explanation. The people of Bedrock are simply better than everyone else. Wow, thanks for being awesome, Bedrock. And then Wilma asks Fred, do you think civilization has made us better people? I don't know, Wilma, but at least there's bowling. So that's one thing I like about Fred, you know. He knows how to look at the lighter side of things. So next page, he's at work. He's at Slate's quarry, and at the end of the day, Mr. Slate says, hot corn, Flintstone. You bust all that rock yourself? Yes, sir, Mr. Slate. Excellent work. Here's your pay. And he pays him with, you know, some pebbles. I think rocks are their currency, but it's implied there that, you know, he gets a small amount compared to what he'd done. Next page, he's bowling with Barney, and he's using an armadillo to bowl with. Those are their bowling balls. So that's really funny, because he's stressed out after work, so they go bowling. And at the end of that page, the bowling ball is talking to his friend Vacuum, and he says, man, work was brutal today. And then the Vacuum asks, so what happens when he takes you out at night? And it has this really funny couple of panels where the armadillo's like explaining from his point of view what it is to be a bowling ball, and he's all stressed out about his plight. And then Vacuum is consoling him, and he says, I have no idea when I'll ever see daylight again, but do you know what keeps me going there in the dark? Knowing that my friend Bowling Ball is on the other side of the door, it makes me think maybe the only meaning to life is that which we get from each other. So that's pretty deep, you know, this comic book run. Every issue, it combines humor with really deep thinking pretty seamlessly. So the next page, Pebbles and Bam Bam are hanging out at the mall, and Professor Sargon walks by. We saw him earlier, and he purchased an abacus. So he's telling the kids all about this new high-tech technology he has. He's talking about it like it's a computer, which, I mean, technically the abacus is the original. That's the first computer, if you think about it. So he ends up he hires Pebbles and Bam Bam to be interns and work at the science cave, and lays off the other scientists. So basically he can save a ton of money on that, and goes to lunch, and when he gets back, somehow Pebbles and Bam Bam have released all of the moths from their cage because they're being studied, and now they're all over the place. And it's causing some problems. It's pretty funny. So then the Professor Sargon uses his abacus to do, let's see what he says. Finally, now I can finish this week's astronomical projections. And then it jumps and it shows the news reporter again. And he says, the Earth has a date with destiny. It's good to see the Earth is dating again. Haha. Now it turns out an asteroid is on a collision course with Earth. Professor Sargon of the Science Cave estimates we now have exactly 3 days until the asteroid will wipe out all life on Earth, including me, you, and everyone else. Wait, what? And then he he kind of freaks out, you know, because, yeah, he found out the world's ending. So the reporter says some crazy stuff. And then it jumps to the Flintstones, and then they're freaking out. Barney and Betty Rubble are also freaking out. They're like, did you hear the news? We're doomed. Where are the kids? And the kids are at the science cave, and the professor sends them home because the world's ending. We see Mr. Slate. He's talking to all his workers assembled, and he says, I suppose you've all heard the news. We have less than 3 days to live before the entire planet is destroyed. First, I want to thank you for your service. I don't merely see you as employees. I think of you as my friends, my family. I've put so much of myself into this quarry that I don't really have anyone else. So, if anyone wants to come hang out at the mansion, it would mean a lot to me. But all the workers just walk away. So, next page, they are at the Church of Gerald. And the priest says, thank you for your continued faith in this time of crisis. Do not blame Gerald for your imminent death. And someone in the crowd yells, why not? Doesn't he control everything? If Gerald cannot save us from an asteroid, then what good is it then? And then they basically all start freaking out and start clubbing each other and stuff. And like this one guy blurts out about him having an affair with another guy's wife, and those two start fighting. So it breaks into total chaos. And Wilma's like, we're leaving. And the priest is like, I'm coming with you. Get me out of here. And they go outside, and it's total chaos out there too. Everyone's losing their minds because they think the world's coming to an end. This guy's using a pterodactyl, and he's like, fly me to the moon, Gregory, to the moon. So it's total anarchy. Fred runs up to a police officer and he says, shouldn't you be doing something about this? Arresting somebody? And the cop's like, you want me to spend my last few hours on Earth filling out paperwork? So the next panel, Fred says, there's no law. The church is an insane asylum. Are there any institutions people believe in anymore? And then they look and they see the Bedrock Mall, which is kind of funny. You know, this is pretty obviously like each issue, you know, it's basically a parody of modern American life set in a Stone Age setting. So they're basically, you know, the only institutions we believe in anymore are the malls and, you know, consumerism. And the next page, it shows Mr. Slate at his mansion. He's all by himself, just hanging out with his turtle, who's basically his servant. And yeah, he's pretty bummed out. He's kind of like, let's see, what does he say? He says, he says, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying alone. And he looks out and sees the sign that says Slate's Quarry, and says, you don't suppose that sign will survive the asteroid, do you? So we get another page. It's total anarchy and insanity. Oh, because they went to the mall, but everyone there is fighting and stuff too, and the pandas have broken out of Panda XS and are mauling people and stuff. So that's pretty bad. So they give up there and they go to the science cave. And Professor Sargon's just there. He's all depressed. The moths are still loose, flying around everywhere. And Pebbles goes up to him and says, like, come on, Professor, tell people you were wrong. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Just let them live their last days with dignity. And the professor's like, I can't lie just to make people feel better about their morality. And the priest, who's still there, says, sure you can, it's easy. And the scientist is like, I'm sorry, but my belief in science compels me to accept the truth, however unpleasant it may be. And he says, my calculations were perfect, check for yourself. And they look at the abacus, and it turns out 2 of the loose moths were on there, and they were like rolled up in a ball, so they look like the stones on the abacus. So it turns out his calculations were wrong. Then we jump to a full page. It's the news reporter now. He's recapping what happened. He says, today the asteroid passed safely by the Earth instead of consuming us in a deadly fireball, as we were told it would. So that's nice. And then he's like, they show a picture of the professor on the screen, and he's like, however, if you have any asteroid-related questions, comments, or violent displeasure, please direct it to Professor Sargon at the Science Cave. And then he goes on and says, I only hope we can go back to pretending we are good people, because they all lost their minds and we're having anarchy. So they go back. It shows back at the church. Everyone is back at church. Everyone's back at work. Yeah, everything's going back to normal. And then the Pebbles and Bam Bam go to the science cave to see if they still have their jobs. And Professor Sargon's taped to the wall, and the place has been, like, pelted with fruit and stuff. And the other scientist that is there, that Professor Sargon fired at the beginning, is there. And basically he wants his tenure back, and he gets hired back on, and they let Pebbles and Bam Bam go. So that was a short job they had. So that was the Flintstones number 6 from 2017. I liked the issue. I thought it was pretty funny. It's, I like every issue actually, but this one was pretty good. It didn't have any, like, depressing parts really. Some of them, it's not that they're depressing, but they're about real life, so sometimes they have sad parts. This one, though, is mostly humor and, I guess action and excitement too when the chaos is going on. Had some stuff to say there about science and religion, which is always interesting as well, whether you agree with it or not. So that's all for now. If there's any other comic books you'd like me to cover, please, let me know. Mention them in the comments. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps me out a great deal. Thanks.
End of line.